on, so I'm going to get a couple of hours on my lounge today. So what I'm going to be doing today is I'm going to overboard the ceiling. So what I've done is I've packed out all this area here, so it's going with the shape of the ceiling, so that way I'm not going to have any dips going up. I bought some 8x4 plasterboards rather than the 6x3 that I normally use when I'm doing ceilings on my own, just because I had some spare over. I won't put a full board up on my own, just for the simple reason that when you're holding it in the middle, what tends to happen is it will snap, whoosh, and you've lost a board. So some things that when you're boarding on your own, I recommend getting some stands, right? So these stands, I've had them for years. There isn't a name on them, so I can't tell you where they're from, but yeah, I've had them for a while. And if you can get hold of a set, it will definitely make your life easier. So what you normally do is you set them so it's so you're nice and tight to the wall, because obviously you're gonna have ½ an inch there. So when you're putting it on, whoosh, it stays there nice and tight. I always use 2, one's not gonna be enough. There are a few other things that you can buy as well. There's actually a plasterboard lifter. I've never used one myself, but I know people who swear by them. I wish I had one when I was putting some soundboards on a ceiling once on my own, which was hard work, and I think that would have made life a lot easier. But for me, I'm used to this. Things that you need to get prepared are, make sure your drill is fully charged. I know mine is, because I've got a little indicator just here. So make sure you've got a fully charged battery. Make sure you've got a hook, so you can actually hook it onto your belt. I've either going to be wearing my hoodie, so I can put a load of screws inside, or I've got like the big pockets, just so I've got screws nearby so I can get a tack up. One thing I'm also going to suggest is, because I can actually see where my joists are, because I've taken this section out here. If you do need to find where your joists are, one of the best things to do is use the sound test. So you've got, normally you can hear when you've actually hit a joist. So you're going to know roughly where your joist is. So what you do is you put your first screw in. I obviously know where this one is because I can see down my line, but what you want to do after you've done that is you want to put a screw either side. So then you know exactly how wide the joist is going to be. And then basically you're always going to be aiming for the middle of the joist when you're actually measuring where the joists are. So that's how you'd normally find your joists. There are a few things that you do have to think about though when you're overboarding a ceiling. One is that not every house is going to be perfect. So you're going to have electrics that might possibly go through a joist, so that's a risk. So when you finish boarding, if there is a light, you want to make sure that you haven't tripped anything when you're doing it. So that can be a risk. Another thing is pipes. I will always say, when you know where your joists are, have a look roughly where pipes are, and then you've got a good idea where they're going to be. Most pipes are kept well above, so you don't want to be using extra lengths on your screws. See here, I'm going to be using some 65s. So I know my board is 12.5 mil, and I know there is a good half an inch or so here. So I know I'm going to get a good fixing, but it's not going to go in too far. So that's an important thing to think about. If you are worried and concerned, it might be worth taking the ceiling down to find where they are. But the first thing I've done is I'm going to mark where all my joists are, because that's going to be your line. Get yourself a pencil or a pen and just mark where they are, just so that you know where they're going to be. So I know where my joists are, I'll be able to figure it out roughly from there. Right, I've just got a tiny area here that I'm just going to have to nip out. And the most important part now is that you check that you have definitely landed on a joist. Oh, these joists are quite tough actually. Actually, I'll show you how it is. So you can actually look down now and you can see that I've landed perfectly in the middle there. So I'll tack that one in a minute. So now I know that I've got a good fix in. So I'm just gonna look down and I'm just gonna screw it all up. A lot of people will actually put a line on their board so that they can actually follow the line just to make things a bit easier for them. I don't do that personally, but there's definitely nothing wrong with having a guide. Right guys, so this is the first board up. It's actually been a bit tougher than I thought because my screws are struggling to go in the wood. I think my drill's on the way out, which is a bit of a bummer, but I've got another one, so, and it's quite a few years old, this one, so it won't be the end of the world if it does die. I've definitely had my money's worth out of it. What I'll do now is I'm just gonna measure from there to there and I'll put another board in. One thing I've not actually spoke about is why I try and catch on I plasterboard going this way, so I'm going across the joists. So I've seen a few people and they actually they'll run their boards along a joist. I'm not saying it's wrong, but it's not going to be as easy for you. It's best if you can to try and spread the weight over your joists. That's why you always do it in brick fashion. It's what's going to stop you having splits all the way across. Some people will put battens on and then they'll put the plasterboards on the batten. That's another good way of doing it. But for me, I think that's an extra process that is not needed when overboarding, but I understand why some people would do that. I'm now gonna go and do the rest of this ceiling. One other thing I will say is that with lath and plaster is that sometimes you'll feel like you've got a good fix in, but you haven't. Basically, you've gone onto the laths. And don't think that the laths are gonna do you any favors. You wanna make sure that you are into the joists, because if you're not into the joists, you're not gonna have the strength. So if you are gonna be going straight over and screwing into the laths as a proper fixing, rather than being on a joist, laths are so thin, they're not strong. You can snap them with your fingers. You gotta think about the amount of weight that you're gonna be putting onto it, because you're gonna be putting a couple of bags of skim on a ceiling this size. And also you've got your board on top of it as well. So I'd always say, make sure you land on a joist. Also, I don't have to be too concerned about my edges because I'm actually going to be putting some insulated plasterboards under this wall. So that's another thing also to think about. So if you need to come off a tiny bit to make sure that you get a full board in, do it. You know, it's if you're going to be covering it with a plasterboard, you don't have to be perfectly to the wall. Right, anywho, let's get going. Right guys, so I'm going to talk to you about how I cut plasterboards. I'm going to show you roughly on a little piece rather than showing you on a big piece because it's going to be easier for me to explain with a little piece. So I'm going to cut a piece from there to there and it's basically, I've measured it at 17. Cutting plasterboards, you can either get your measurements, so let's say you got your 17 there. You can mark it here as well. What a lot of people do is they'll just put a rule and you can just cut it with your knife and then you can snap it. But the trick for making it quicker and a bit more economical with your time is what you do is you get your tape, you get your measurement and you lock it into there. And what you do is you run, make sure you've got your finger there, and basically you just run your finger all the way down, and that's will be 17 all the way down. So that's the easiest way of doing it. So basically, as I said, you get it, make sure your cut's all the way in, just run it all the way down. Once you've cut it, basically turn it over, give it a little bit of a bash. It'll come up just like that. Run your knife all the way down this area here, and there you have it. You've got your cut there. It's pretty good, but if you want to get it even better, what you need to get is, so I would recommend getting one of these. So basically you can just run it down a couple of times, and there you go. Your board now is ready to go up. So that's just a quick tip for how to cut a plasterboard. If you're doing it on a bigger board, it's exactly the same thing. Get your measurements, put your blade in, make a lock, and just keep your hands together and run it all the way down. And that's the easiest way. So that's just a little tip of how I speed up cutting plasterboards. Now that I've moved over from this area now, when you're going to be measuring for your next board, make sure you put some screws in just to make sure you are going to hit the middle of the joist, because obviously now that you've got to here, you're not going to be able to tell just as much. So what you do, put your screws in, make sure you know that it's got a good fixing. You can normally tell by the feel of the screw going into the joist, and as soon as you know that, then you know that your screw is taken and you know that you're on a joist. Also, one thing when you're actually cutting plasterboards is you don't want to be meeting your next board to be on the joint. So when you're cutting the next one, it can't end up here. So either you want it to end up a bit closer to here or to here, just so it's more in a brick fashion, just because otherwise I think that you're putting extra weight on the joists. So there's more chance of it actually cracking. So you're just spreading that weight more evenly. Right, so I guess the next problem area now is going to be the light. So what I've done is I've just dropped it down. I'm actually going to cut a board so it goes from there to this area here, and I'll split it down here. And this is how you get around working around lights. Right guys, I've finished boarding the ceiling now. That'll probably be me done for today. Yeah, that's basically how I tackle doing an overboard. As I said, it's all good to go now. My next port of call on this is I'm going to be tanking the walls, and then I'm going to be adding some insulated plasterboards. So I've already bought some. I was lucky enough to get some in a Black Friday deal, if you can believe it, in Travis Perkins, so I've made up with that. But yeah, so I've got the walls that I want to chuck on, but first I'm going to have to put some tanking on, but that's going to be in another video, and I'll explain why I'm doing the tanking there. But yeah, this is This is just part of a room that I'm doing in my own house at the moment, so I'm going to keep these videos coming so that I can show a few of the tips that I've acquired over the years. And yeah, I hope some of this has helped. If you've got any questions, leave them in the comments. But yeah, thank you guys for watching this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and there'll be another video coming shortly. Right, thanks guys, bye.